Hello YouTube, this is Neon. Today I'm going to be talking about a pretty intense subject. It's going to be about biracial adoption, when whites adopt African American children, and how many times we as African Americans, in our efforts to get justice for the economic inequality in this country, many times we, in seeking justice, ourselves commit injustice against whites. I'm still here, I just spilled water. So, all of this started when I read a very interesting article about a middle-aged couple that was involved in foster to adopt of two African-American girls. They were very young. I think one was maybe 5 and one was maybe 2 or 3. I believe they were sisters. I believe they were biological sisters born by the same mother, and both unfortunately had been born either addicted to crack or with crack in their system. So these parents, these adoptive parents, were the only parents that these two little girls ever knew as mom and dad. They'd gone through all this process of years and years and years, and they were very close to finalizing. They were in the last stages of finalizing the adoption process and really becoming their full legal guardians. At this point, African American social workers did everything to prevent this from happening. They did not want to see these white parents become the full legal guardians of these African American children. And they went so far as going to the school of these girls, taking these girls out of the school, placing them in different foster homes where really their legitimate parents would know where they were. What they did was tantamount to kidnapping their daughters. Now, they didn't want to see black children, African American children, calling white parents mom and dad. They didn't want to see that. And the only other option would be to bounce these girls around from foster home to foster home, which happens all too often, and children's lives become destroyed because they really don't have any roots, they don't have any foundation, and they don't have any stability. Rarely are children who are bounced around like that able to succeed. So these parents fought in the courts, they fought tooth and nail. They wound up going bankrupt. They wound up losing their home. And ultimately, what the judge told the social worker was, you better find these two girls. You better get these two girls back to their parents now, or you are not going to be released from this court. You will be placed in jail until these girls are found. Because the social workers were so bent on using these little African American girls presumably to get revenge on these decent white parents, that they were willing to destroy the lives of these African American girls in order to do so. And the judge wouldn't have it. The judge was like, you don't know where the girls are? Well, guess what? You're going to go to jail till you find the girls. So these girls were taken out of these foster homes. They were given back to their rightful parents. And ultimately, these two white parents became the full legal guardians. They overcame their bankruptcy, they're losing their home, and were able to recover financially and be the good parents that they wanted to be. The most surprising thing about this was that these parents said that they had really no hard feeling against these African American social workers who did this to them, and that they actually have more compassion to the African American community for all of the injustice that we continue to suffer today. So I thought that was kind of ironic. They said that because of all of the injustice that they suffered for having done nothing wrong, that now they have more compassion for the African American community. I thought that was a good thing. Now, as someone who at one time called a white woman mom because she was like a mom to me, I certainly prior to that had issues with seeing an African American child call a white parent mom or dad, right? Because I have a little bit of anger and angst that's really unhealthy. Why is it unhealthy? Well, a little backstory. In the 90s, I would always go shopping. I would notice Parenting Magazine. It seems like a magazine that's really geared towards parents with young children. Let's say from birth to 9 or 10 years old. I'm guessing. I don't know. But I'm just basing it on the cover. And every month they come out with a new magazine, and there was always a white child on the cover. They'd have a big face of a white child, and if they did have a child of color, it would be in a little small picture to the side, and it would be some issue like Halloween costumes, or it might be something related to throwing a Christmas party for a young child, and then they would have a little Asian child to the side, or maybe a little African American child. I found that to be very offensive. I'm like, why can't they gear Parenting Magazine for all parents and put the big picture with a child of color? Has Parenting Magazine done that since the 90s? I don't know. I hope that they have. I would assume that they have, but I don't know. It was very offensive. There's a magazine that I heard about that's called Black Child. And I don't know if that magazine is still around, but I got to know about that magazine from a talk show on biracial adoptions and when whites want to adopt African American children, and how not all African American social workers, but many, they use African American children as pawns to get revenge against potential white adoptive parents. The editor of Black Child, which is a parenting magazine that's more geared towards the African American community, the big picture of a child's face on the front cover is an African American child. I'm assuming every month it is, given the title is Black Child. And that's a beautiful thing. The editor, who is an African American woman, said that overwhelmingly white parents who adopt black children do a good job, that they do raise African American children to know their race, to know their culture, to know their history, to know all of the injustices, but to also be aware and to really know about Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth and Benjamin Banneker and Frederick Douglass and Reverend Dr. King Jr., right? Phyllis Wheatley, and all of the amazing African Americans in history, so that their child has a better balance of knowledge about their history and the greatness and the genius and the overcoming, so that their African American children have a broad view of life and of their potential. And this African American editor of Black Child said that white parents do that as good as some of the best African American parents do when they raise their children to know about all the injustices, all of the injustice, but to also know about all of the greatness in our community. Frederick Douglass, Benjamin Banneker, W.E.B. Du Bois, Langston Hughes, James Baldwin, Booker T. Washington, that's the name I was looking for, the great Booker T. Washington. And to know the greatness in our community as well, not just one side. Now, I wanted to state briefly that there's one state where a woman who adopted an African American child, she said that something like 93% of white adoptive parents will not adopt African American children. I don't know if that state was Iowa. I honestly do not remember what state that was. I think that's sad. I don't know why some states permit people to pick and choose what child they'll adopt and what child they won't, and why so many adoptive parents in that state seem to think that's okay to say, I don't want an African American child. Okay? But anyway, given what this African American woman editor of Black Child said about white parents, overwhelmingly, right, who adopt African American children, I realize I don't have any legitimate reason to be against or be offended by seeing an African American child refer to their white mom as mom or to their white dad as dad. That's totally legitimate. I'm a firm believer that being an egg donor or a sperm donor doesn't make somebody a parent. There's many women now who are surrogate moms. They're nobody's mother. They just have the child, and then the real parents raise the child. So having a child doesn't make somebody a mother. Now, after reading this article, I was really shocked. The article about how the white parents went bankrupt to defend their children and to get their children back. And I remember talking to an African American social worker. She happened to be a woman, and I was working in front of this store doing voter registration or petition, gathering signatures for petitions. And how I found out she was a social worker, she may have mentioned it casually. But I asked her, I told her about this article, and I said, does this happen? Are you aware of this? And she said that it does happen, that there are African American social workers that try to prevent white parents from adopting African American children and kind of make their lives hell so that they're not able to fully adopt and finalize the adoption. She said that she said, I am not one of them. She says, I don't judge based on that, so I'm not one of them, but she said it does happen. Interestingly, in the talk show with the editor of Black Child, they said that a large percentage of children who are needed for adoption in the U.S. are African American children, and a large percentage of the parents they want to adopt are white parents. They said that most of the children that are within the foster care network in the U.S. are controlled by African American social workers. And so they said that this really kind of goes on throughout the United States. It's a terrible way of trying to get justice. It's a terrible way of trying to get economic equality. It really is, because it's hurting African American children who are in the foster care system. And it's not right. It's not the way to get justice, is by harming whites that don't deserve to be harmed and harming African American children by preventing them from finding a stable home. Now, I read an article on Yahoo News about a white woman who adopted an African American son who was much bigger than the average children of his age. And she talked about all of the injustice against African Americans, and she said that she hates the fact that her child can't play hide and go seek at night, in part because even though he's like 12 years old, he's almost as tall as a man. And so while the other kids can run around in the neighborhood and hide behind trees and stuff like that, she says that she knows that particularly at night, if he does that, someone will call the police, he may get shot and killed. And her son is like 12 years old. So she talked in a way that she was so aware of our plight that if I hadn't known she was white, I would have thought she was African American. She was really, really concerned about Black Lives Matters, and I think that everything that she had to say was really sound, and I agreed with her. I went down to the comments and I saw what appeared to me to be some very unhappy and unjust African Americans, and I assumed they were African Americans because they were saying stuff like, who the hell is this white woman to try to speak for the African American community? Again, we are using injustice, intolerance, illogic to try to get justice. This woman doesn't deserve to be attacked. As I said, if I had not known that this woman was white, I would have thought she was an African American mom talking about our issues because she spoke so soundly. And here we are as African Americans oftentimes trying to attack whites, and it's not going to bring justice, particularly when it's good white people like some of these people that I've mentioned. So this is a sticky subject, and it's something that I just decided I wanted to talk about. So if you like this video, please like, subscribe, share, comment commercials, recommend my videos. Do one or more of those things. Thank you, and best wishes.